By the time 1989 drew to a close, Anthrax had every reason to feel the pressure building. State of Euphoria had landed with mixed results. Fans and critics, who had championed Among the Living, felt the band had played it too safe, recycling ideas rather than pushing forward. The thrash world was evolving fast, with Metallica, Megadeth, and Slayer all sharpening their blades for new records. Anthrax couldn't afford to blink, so in the fall of 1989, they went back to work, reuniting with producer Mark Dodson, the man behind State of Euphoria, and set about trying to write the heaviest, most focused record of their career. The band began stockpiling ideas in the way they always did. Charlie Benante filling up cassette tapes with riff after riff on guitar, Scott Ian running those ideas through rehearsals, the five of them hammering shapes into songs in a room together before ever stepping into a proper studio. Ian was in a difficult personal stretch. He'd recently gone through a divorce, and that emotional weight wasn't being left at the door. It was being put into the music. And then on January 24th, 1990, everything literally went up in flames. A massive fire tore through the band's rehearsal space. When the smoke cleared, Anthrax had lost over $100,000 worth of equipment, irreplaceable gear. Their sanctuary, the room where the songs had been born, was gone. For a lot of bands, that's the end of the story. You call the insurance company, you sit with a loss, and somewhere in the back of your mind you wonder if the universe is trying to tell you something. Anthrax didn't read it that way. If anything, the fire seemed to harden their resolve. They relocated, regrouped, and in late February, they were back in a different studio, building the album from the ground up again. The disruption, the chaos, the sheer grinding persistence required just to finish the thing. All of it ended up embedded in the record's DNA. They had a title already waiting for it, Persistence of Time. It couldn't have fit any better if they planned it. What emerged from that fire-tested writing process was something that genuinely surprised people. This was not the Anthrax of Caught in a Mosh and I Am the Law. The cartoonish energy, the pop culture winks, the shorts and high tops attitudes, most of that was gone. In its place was something darker, leaner, and more deliberately constructed than anything they'd attempted before. Songs were longer and more progressive in their structure, built to unfold rather than immediately detonate. Where earlier records hit you in the first 10 seconds and never let up, Persistence of Time asked you to sit with it, to ride out the tension before the release. Lyrically, the album was staring directly at the uglier side of modern life. Urban frustration, intolerance, social rot, the kind of subjects that weren't exactly staples of mainstream thrash metal at the time. Rolling Stone described it as a journey into what they called the dreary gray bowels of urban hell. And while that's a pretty bleak way to set a record, it wasn't wrong. AllMusic would later call it Anthrax's most lyrically consistent album, arguing it rivaled Among the Living as their best work overall. The New York Times, not exactly a regular stop on the metal press circuit, wrote that the music carries the exhilaration of a desperate struggle. That's a good line. It's also exactly what the album sounds like. Now, given all that, the weight, the darkness, the long progressive song structures, you might expect the lead single to arrive wrapped in the same heavy gravity. But this is Anthrax. They don't do predictable. The lead single was a cover of Got the Time by Joe Jackson, a tightly wound, almost manic song from Jackson's 1979 new wave album, Look Sharp. Anthrax took the original and turned it into a thrash missile, fast, precise, almost unnervingly catchy for a band operating in the sonic register. It was barely over 2 minutes. It ran completely counter to everything else on the record in terms of tone and length, and it was absolutely the right call. The song earned the band critical MTV and radio airplay they desperately needed, helped push the album toward gold certification within months of release, and introduced the record to listeners who might otherwise have bounced off the denser material. Joe Jackson himself said he enjoyed what they did with it. That's the clean sweep. You cover the song, the original artist approves, and it charts. Not bad for a band that could have released almost anything else. But the meat of this record isn't in the singles. It's in the longer tracks, the ones that take their time and make you work for them. Keep It in the Family is one of the most interesting things Anthrax had written to that point. It runs over 7 minutes. It earns every second. There's a hypnotic quality to the guitar work, a grinding circular riff pattern that gets under your skin and stays there. Thematically, it's about loyalty and betrayal, about the ties that bind and the damage done when those things snap. It doesn't sound like Anthrax who wrote Ifan Nickelfessin. It sounds like a band that has grown up not always comfortably. Belly of the Beast is the closer, and it's a legitimate statement. Running over 8 minutes, it builds with slow patience of a band that knows exactly what it's doing, layering tension across a sprawling structure before they finally letting go. It's one of the tracks that demonstrates most clearly how much the band's ambitions had expanded. This isn't thrash as a sprint, it's thrash as a long, deliberate burn. And then there's Hatred, a track that carries its paranoia right there in the title. Aggressive and claustrophobic, taps into the same vein of social anxiety that runs through the rest of the album, with a momentum that doesn't let up. No clever hook, no wink at the audience, just forward pressure. Between these songs, the album paints a picture of a band that had decided, consciously or not, to bet on maturity. Whether every fan was ready for that bet was a different question, but in hindsight, it mostly paid off. Persistence of Time went gold in early 1991, and the band spent nearly 2 years on the road behind it. They opened for Iron Maiden on the No Prayer for the Dying tour across Europe and North America. They were on the Clash of the Titans tour alongside Megadeth, Slayer, and the then relatively unknown opening act called Alice in Chains. That's some serious company. But here's the thing about Anthrax that sets them apart from most of their peers. They were never just a touring band chasing the next arena. They were present in popular culture in ways that other thrash acts simply weren't, and that presence was about to peak. It actually started a little bit before Persistence of Time dropped. Back in 1989, MTV's Headbangers Ball ran a contest where the prize, and this is real, was having Anthrax come to your house. The winner was a female fan, and on May 23rd, 1989, the band showed up at a place and proceeded to spontaneously trash it. The whole thing was documented and aired. It was chaotic and loud, and completely off-brand for five guys from Queens who had always operated with a kind of joyful irreverence that existed alongside, not instead of, the heavy music they made. That house trashing story didn't just become a piece of Anthrax mythology, it literally became a TV plot.
According to this contract, you owe us a song first.
Hey, it's supposed to be dinner.
In 1992, the band appeared on an episode of Married with Children titled My Dinner with Anthrax, where the Bundys win a contest structurally identical to the MTV one, and Anthrax shows up and performs In My World on the show. The episode aired February 23rd, 1992. It's genuinely funny, put the band in front of a massive mainstream audience, and it captures something true about Anthrax, that they were one of the only bands in the genre who could do that kind of thing and not look ridiculous doing it. The tension between that tighter, culturally engaged side of the band and the grinding seriousness of Persistence of Time is part of what makes this period fascinating. They were writing about urban despair and social collapse while also appearing on primetime television sitcoms and trashing fans' houses for MTV contests. That's a hard line to walk, and somehow they walked it. But the era wasn't done with them, and everything you've seen in this chapter, the fire, the album, the tours, the television appearances, was building towards something, because in 1991, Anthrax went into the studio to collect rarities, B-sides, covers, and new material for a compilation called Attack of the Killer Bees. And one of those new tracks would pair them with one of the most important acts in hip-hop history for a collaboration that nobody saw coming, and that absolutely nobody could ignore. That will be the next episode. In the meantime, check out this playlist, The Story of Anthrax from the beginning. I'm telling the whole story and some adjacent bands like SOD and maybe a few others down the road. But in the meantime, thanks for watching. Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. See you in the next one.